Richard Bennett adjusted his Italian silk tie for the third time in 10 minutes. His jaw clenched as he watched his 7-year-old son, Ethan, struggle with his crutches across the marble floor of Bennett Medical Center. The irony wasn't lost on him, owning the most advanced private medical facility on the East Coast, yet being powerless to help his own child walk normally. Mr. Bennett, the Tokyo investors are waiting in conference room A. His assistant, Jessica, whispered, her voice barely audible in the sterile hallway lined with awards and accolades that suddenly felt meaningless. "Tell them I need 5 more minutes," Richard replied, his steel gray eyes never leaving Ethan as the boy paused to rest his small hands gripping the crutches with determination that both broke and strengthened his father's heart simultaneously. At 47, Richard Bennett had conquered the medical industry through sheer will and brilliant strategy. His salt and pepper hair, precisely cut to frame his angular face, gave him the distinguished appearance of authority. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist had been a gift to himself when Bennett Medical went public 3 years ago. Everything in his life was measured, controlled, and acquired through careful calculation. Everything except his son's condition. Dr. Lawrence approached with the latest test results, his expression already telegraphing disappointment. The experimental treatment from Switzerland showed no significant improvement. "Richard, I'm afraid we've exhausted most conventional options." Richard's hands curled into fists. 3 years of searching consulting specialists from Harvard to Mayo Clinic, spending millions on cutting-edge treatments, and still his son faced each day with courage that humbled the most powerful CEO in the city. Ethan's condition, a rare neurological disorder affecting his motor skills, had stumped every expert they'd consulted. The boy's mother would have known what to do. Claire had been the real medical genius in the family before the accident took her away from them. "Daddy, can we get lunch at that place with the really good grilled cheese?" Ethan asked, his bright smile masking any frustration he might feel about his limitations. "Of course, buddy. Anything you want," Richard replied, scooping Ethan into his arms, crutches and all. The boy's laughter echoed through the corridor, a sound more precious than any profit margin Richard had ever achieved. As Jessica rescheduled the meeting with the Tokyo investors, Richard carried his son to the black Escalade, waiting at the private entrance. Ethan had discovered Charlie's Diner during one of their medical appointments nearby, and though Richard felt overdressed in his $3,000 suit among the vinyl booths and checkered floors, Ethan's excitement made any discomfort worthwhile. The memory of Claire haunted Richard as he gazed out the window at the Manhattan skyline. She had been everything he wasn't: compassionate, patient-gifted, with an innate understanding of medicine that went beyond textbooks and clinical trials. A pediatric neurologist at the top of her field, she'd been researching treatments for conditions like Ethan's when the car accident stole her from them 3 years ago. The cruel irony that their son developed symptoms of the very condition she had dedicated her life to curing was not lost on Richard. He glanced at his watch, the same one he'd been wearing the night of the accident. He should have been the one driving. He should have been there instead of working late at the office. The weight of that guilt pressed on him daily, pushing him to search relentlessly for a cure for Ethan's condition, as if saving his son could somehow atone for failing to save his wife. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the modest establishment tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store. The contrast between Richard's life of Manhattan penthouses and boardrooms and this small neighborhood diner was stark, but seeing Ethan's eyes light up made it feel like the only place in the world that mattered. A bell jingled as they entered, the aroma of coffee and home cooking filling the air. Richard helped Ethan to a booth by the window, carefully arranging the crutches against the wall. The diner was half full, mostly locals who barely glanced up at the newcomers. "Welcome to Charlie's table for 2. The voice was warm, melodious, with an undertone of intelligence that made Richard look up from helping Ethan with his jacket. Lauren Davis stood before them, order pad in hand, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore the standard black uniform, but something about her posture suggested she belonged somewhere far more sophisticated than this humble diner. Her emerald eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond her apparent 38 years. "Yes, our usual table by the window," Richard replied curtly, already reaching for his phone to check emails. "You must be Ethan," Lauren said, crouching down to the boy's eye level with natural ease. "I've heard you make the best grilled cheese recommendations in the entire city." Ethan giggled, immediately charmed. "Daddy says I'm an expert because I've tried grilled cheese everywhere." "A connoisseur," Lauren said seriously, as if discussing fine wine. That's very impressive. I bet you know exactly how the cheese should melt, don't you? As they walked to the table, Richard noticed Lauren's stride, confident, purposeful, almost clinical. She moved with the precision of someone accustomed to high-pressure environments, not the casual gait he'd expect from a small-town waitress. "Can I help you with those?" Lauren asked Ethan, gesturing to his crutches with matter-of-fact kindness, rather than the awkward pity most adults displayed. "I got it," Ethan said proudly, maneuvering himself into the booth. "I'm getting really fast with these." "I can see that. Your balance and coordination are excellent," Lauren replied, and Richard caught something in her tone. Not just politeness, but genuine professional assessment. "You seem to know a lot about physical therapy for a waitress," Richard said, his voice carrying an edge of suspicion mixed with curiosity. Lauren's expression flickered for just a moment, a shadow passing across her features before she recovered her professional smile. "I've had some experience with mobility challenges," she replied diplomatically. "Now, what can I get you gentlemen today?" As she took their orders, Richard found himself studying her hands. They were soft, well-maintained, with calluses in places that suggested activities more complex than carrying plates. When she wrote their order, her penmanship was precise, almost medical in its clarity. "Daddy, she's really nice," Ethan whispered, after Lauren left for the kitchen. "Yes, she seems adequate," Richard replied, though his attention kept drifting toward the kitchen, where he could see Lauren moving with efficiency that bordered on choreographed. Richard's phone buzzed with an urgent email from Jessica about the rescheduled meeting, but for once he found himself reluctant to dive into work. Something about this diner, about the waitress with the knowing eyes, had triggered his finely tuned instincts for recognizing when things weren't quite what they seemed. When Lauren returned with their food, Ethan was attempting to open a stubborn packet of crackers, his fine motor skills making the simple task frustratingly difficult. Lauren watched for a moment, then sat down beside him. "May I show you a trick?" she asked gently. "Sometimes the angle makes all the difference." She guided Ethan's hands, adjusting his grip with subtle precision that immediately made the task easier. Richard observed the interaction with growing fascination. Lauren's touch was confident, therapeutic, almost like watching a seasoned occupational therapist work with a patient. "There you go. You just needed to engage your thumb muscles differently," Lauren explained, and Richard nearly choked on his coffee. Engage thumb muscles wasn't typical waitress vocabulary. "Are you sure you're just a server here?" Richard asked directly, his businessman's instincts sensing something wasn't adding up. Lauren's cheeks flushed slightly. "I serve food, yes. Is there something wrong with that?" "Nothing wrong with honest work," Richard replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by her answer. "You just seem to have some interesting skills." "People are full of surprises, Mr. Bennett," Lauren said with a slight smile that could have been interpreted as mysterious or simply polite. The name recognition hit Richard immediately. "I never mentioned my last name." Lauren's eyes widened for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "You're Richard Bennett. Your picture was in the business section last week. The medical center expansion." She smiled. "Plus, Ethan mentioned you own several hospitals during his grilled cheese expertise consultation." Smooth recovery, Richard thought, but not quite smooth enough. This waitress had just revealed she read business news and retained detailed information about medical facilities. His curiosity was rapidly evolving into genuine intrigue. For the first time since entering the diner, Richard put his phone away and gave Lauren his full attention. "Daddy, can Lauren eat with us?" Ethan asked suddenly. "She knows about thumb muscles, and she likes grilled cheese, too." Richard expected Lauren to politely decline, but she hesitated, glancing around the nearly empty diner. "If your father doesn't mind, I suppose I could take a short break." "Please join us," Richard heard himself saying, surprising himself with the genuine invitation in his voice. As Lauren slid into the booth across from them, Richard noticed the way she automatically assessed Ethan's posture, the subtle adjustments she made to his positioning without drawing attention to it. Every instinct told him this woman was hiding something significant, and Richard Bennett had built his empire by trusting his instincts about people. "So Lauren," he began, leaning back in his seat with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to getting answers. "What brought you to waitressing at Charlie's?" The question landed like a challenge, and Lauren's response would determine whether Richard's growing suspicions were justified or if he was simply intrigued by an unusually observant server who'd happened to capture his son's heart with genuine kindness. Lauren's fork hovered over her salad as Richard's question hung in the air between them. She could feel his penetrating gaze analyzing every micro-expression, every pause. Ethan, oblivious to the underlying tension, was happily demolishing his grilled cheese with the unself-conscious enthusiasm only children possess. Life doesn't always go according to plan, Lauren replied carefully, taking a measured bite to buy herself time. Sometimes we end up in places we never expected. That's remarkably philosophical for someone serving comfort food. Richard observed his tone, carrying just enough warmth to soften what could have been an accusation. I prefer to think of it as adaptable, Lauren shot back with a slight smile. It's amazing how much you can learn about people when you're not sitting behind a mahogany desk making assumptions about their intelligence based on their job title. Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the subtle verbal jab. Touché, though I'd argue that curiosity about someone who discusses thumb muscle engagement with 7-year-olds isn't quite the same as making assumptions. Fair point, Lauren conceded, and Ethan looked up from his sandwich, sensing the adult conversation had taken an interesting turn. Are you guys having one of those grown-up discussions where you say one thing but mean something else? Ethan asked with startling perceptiveness. Lauren laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. Your son is exceptionally bright, Mr. Bennett. He gets it from his mother, Richard replied automatically, then felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always accompanied thoughts of Claire. She'd been gone for 3 years, but the grief still ambushed him at unexpected moments. Lauren noticed the shift immediately. I'm sorry for your loss, she said quietly, with the kind of empathy that suggested personal experience with grief. Richard studied her face, surprised by the genuine understanding he saw there. How did you know I was talking about loss? The way your voice changed, the slight tension in your shoulders. Some things are universal regardless of tax bracket. Lauren replied, then seemed to catch herself being too observant again. You notice a lot for someone who supposedly just brings food to tables, Richard said, but his tone had shifted from suspicious to intrigued. Ethan had been following the conversation with the intensity of a child who sensed something important was happening. Lauren, do you know about helping people who can't walk good? The question was innocent, but Lauren's reaction was immediate, and telling her entire body tensed for a moment, her fingers gripping her fork just a bit too tightly. Richard filed the response away mentally. I know a little, Lauren said carefully. Why do you ask, sweetheart? Because sometimes my legs don't work like other kids, and the doctors can't fix it. But when you helped me with the crackers, it felt different. Better somehow. Richard watched Lauren's expression shift through several emotions, surprise, something that looked like recognition, and then a carefully controlled, professional detachment that seemed oddly familiar. Ethan, Lauren said gently, would you mind if I looked at how you hold things just to see if there are any little tricks that might help? She was asking permission from both Ethan and Richard, but her voice had taken on a tone of quiet authority that made Richard sit up straighter. This was not a waitress making conversation with a customer. This was someone with actual expertise making a clinical assessment. Sure, Ethan said eagerly while Richard nodded, his consent fascination overriding caution. Lauren moved to Ethan's side of the booth, her movements precise and purposeful. She watched him pick up his sandwich, observed his grip on his cup, made mental notes that Richard could practically see forming behind her focused expression. Ethan, can you make a fist for me? She asked. Good. Now wiggle just your fingers while keeping your thumb still. Perfect. Her voice had shifted entirely. Warm but professional, encouraging but analytical. Your fine motor control was actually quite good, she continued, and Richard felt his breath catch. Fine motor control was exactly what Dr. Lawrence had discussed during their last appointment, the specific area where Ethan struggled most. Try this, Lauren said, showing Ethan how to position his hand differently when reaching for his cup. Engage from your shoulder. Let the strength flow down through your arm to your fingers instead of trying to force it from your wrist. The change in Ethan's movement was subtle but immediate. His reach was steadier, more controlled. Richard leaned forward, hardly believing what he was seeing. How did you know to do that? Richard asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Lauren froze, realizing she'd revealed too much. I've helped people before with similar challenges. What people wear, and don't tell me you learned this from serving coffee and pie. Richard pressed, his paternal desperation overriding any concern about politeness. Ethan was practicing his new grip technique, delighted with the improvement, unaware of the charged atmosphere developing between the adults. It's complicated, Lauren said, starting to withdraw. My son's condition is complicated too. Richard replied, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years of desperate searching. So please help me understand how a waitress knows more about his motor skills than specialists from Johns Hopkins. Lauren looked at Ethan, still happily experimenting with his improved dexterity, then back at Richard. Something in his expression, raw hope mixed with barely controlled desperation, seemed to reach her. I used to be a neurologist specializing in pediatric rehabilitation, she said quietly, before I came here. Richard felt his world shift slightly. Used to be, why did you stop? Because sometimes the medical world isn't as pure as people believe, Lauren replied, her voice carrying a bitter edge that spoke of personal betrayal. That's cryptic. It's honest, Lauren countered. Not everything can be solved with money and connections, Mr. Bennett, even when you own medical centers. The challenge in her voice sparked something in Richard, not anger, but recognition. Here was someone who spoke to him without deference or manipulation. Someone who saw through his wealth and position to address him as simply another person seeking help for his child. You're right, he said, surprising both of them. Money can't cure Ethan. 3 years and millions of dollars have proven that. But knowledge can help. Experience can make a difference. And right now, you seem to have both. Lauren stared at him, clearly not expecting the admission of vulnerability from someone with his reputation for control and dominance. What exactly are you asking me? She said cautiously. I'm asking you to help my son, Richard replied simply. Whatever it costs, whatever you need, whatever went wrong in your past, none of that matters if you can make Ethan's life better. Ethan looked up at both adults, sensing the gravity of the moment. Lauren, would you help me walk better? I promise I'll be good and do exactly what you say. Lauren's composure finally cracked slightly, emotion flickering across her features. Ethan, you're already perfect exactly as you are. Any help I might offer would just be tools to make things easier. So you'll help? Ethan asked hopefully. Lauren looked at Richard, then back at Ethan, clearly wrestling with a decision that involved more than just physical therapy techniques. I need to think about it, she said finally. This is more complicated than you might realize. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing his personal number on the back. Take all the time you need, but please consider it. Whatever happened before doesn't have to define what happens next. Lauren took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. The contact was electric, unexpected, and both of them pulled back slightly in surprise at the jolt of awareness. I should get back to work, Lauren said, her professional mask sliding back into place, but not quite hiding the flush in her cheeks. As she cleared their plates, Richard found himself memorizing details about her, the way she moved, the careful control of her expressions, the obvious intelligence she was trying to downplay. Ethan was already asking when they could come back to see Lauren again. Richard Bennett was accustomed to getting what he wanted through persistence and resources. But something told him that Lauren Davis would require a different approach entirely, one that might challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and what he was willing to sacrifice for the people he loved. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Richard stood in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled below, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. On his desk sat a framed photo of Claire, her smile radiant as she held a newborn Ethan in her arms. He picked it up, running his thumb along the edge of the frame. What would you make of Lauren Davis? He asked the photograph, his voice soft in the empty room. Claire had always been an excellent judge of character, seeing through facades to the heart of people with an uncanny accuracy. He set the photo down and opened his laptop, tempted to run a background check on Lauren. His finger hovered over the keyboard. No, that wasn't the way to build trust. If she was going to help Ethan, they needed a foundation of respect, not suspicion. He closed the laptop and poured himself a glass of scotch instead. Whatever secrets Lauren was hiding, they were hers to reveal. For now, all that mattered was the way Ethan's face had lit up when she showed him how to hold his cup differently. It was the first genuine hope Richard had felt in 3 years of searching for answers. 3 days passed before Richard received Lauren's call. He was in the middle of a board meeting discussing quarterly projections with investors from 3 different continents when his personal phone buzzed. Seeing an unfamiliar number, he almost ignored it until something made him step out of the conference room. Mr. Bennett, this is Lauren Davis from Charlie's Diner. Her voice was different over the phone, more formal, carefully controlled. Richard felt his pulse quicken unexpectedly. Lauren, I was beginning to wonder if you'd decided against helping Ethan. I've been thinking about it, she replied. A lot. If I agree to work with him, there would need to be conditions. Richard almost smiled. Of course there would be conditions. In his experience, the most valuable people always had non-negotiable terms. I'm listening. First, we do this properly, not as a favor or charity case, but as a professional therapeutic relationship. I'll need to see his complete medical history, consult with his current doctors, and establish a real treatment plan. Done. What else? Second, we work at neutral locations, not your house, not the medical center, somewhere Ethan can feel comfortable and relaxed. Richard paused, intrigued by her insistence on boundaries. Any suggestions? There's a community center about 10 minutes from the diner. They have an excellent physical therapy space that they rent by the hour, clean, well-equipped, but not intimidating. And the third condition, Richard asked, sensing there was more. Lauren hesitated. My past isn't up for discussion. You hired me to help Ethan, not to satisfy your curiosity about why I'm working as a waitress instead of practicing neurology. The slight break in her voice told Richard everything he needed to know. Whatever had driven Lauren from pediatric neurology to serving coffee had been traumatic enough to leave lasting scars. Agreed, he said simply. When can we start? Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Richard hung up feeling a mixture of hope and anticipation that had nothing to do with Ethan's treatment and everything to do with seeing Lauren Davis in her element. The board members were surprised when Richard returned to the meeting with a renewed energy, dispatching complex financial discussions with uncharacteristic brevity. His mind was already planning ahead to Saturday, organizing Ethan's medical records, rearranging his typically packed weekend schedule. For the first time in years, the weight of responsibility felt a little lighter on his shoulders. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Richard had barely slept, alternating between excitement about potential progress for Ethan and an inexplicable nervousness about seeing Lauren again. Ethan, meanwhile, had been talking about nothing but Lauren the helper since they'd left the diner. The community center was modest but well-maintained, housed in a converted warehouse with high ceilings and natural light streaming through skylights. Richard expected to wait to go through typical preliminary discussions, maybe fill out paperwork. Instead, he found Lauren in the physical therapy room wearing black athletic clothing that revealed toned arms and an athletic build that spoke of serious fitness training. Her hair was pulled back in a functional ponytail, and she was reviewing what appeared to be a detailed folder of documents. You've been busy, Richard observed, noting the professional setup, exercise mats, various therapy tools, and what looked like a carefully planned session outline. I told you if we're doing this, we're doing it right, Lauren replied, looking up with a smile that was warmer than her phone voice had suggested. Ethan, are you ready to do some work? Yes, what kind of work? Ethan asked eagerly, his crutches tucked under his arms. The fun kind, Lauren said with a wink, but first I need to understand exactly how your body works right now. Is that okay? For the next 30 minutes, Richard watched Lauren conduct the most thorough assessment of Ethan's condition he had ever witnessed. She was patient but precise, encouraging but analytical, guiding Ethan through movements and exercises while making detailed notes. Her expertise was undeniable. She identified muscle weaknesses and compensatory patterns that previous therapists had missed, asked questions about Ethan's daily activities that revealed insights no doctor had considered, and most remarkably, managed to make the entire evaluation feel like an elaborate game. Ethan, you're doing fantastic, Lauren said as they finished the assessment portion. Now I want to show you something cool. She guided Ethan to a mat and showed him a series of exercises that looked deceptively simple, but were clearly designed to address his specific neurological challenges. What impressed Richard most was how Lauren modified her approach in real-time, reading Ethan's responses and adjusting accordingly. Feel the difference when you engage your core first, Lauren asked as Ethan completed a movement with notably better control than his baseline. Yeah, it's like my whole body works together instead of just my arms, Ethan said, his excitement genuine. Richard felt his throat tighten with emotion. In 30 minutes, Lauren had helped Ethan achieve better motor control than months of conventional therapy. But more than that, she'd given Ethan confidence, made him feel capable rather than limited. Lauren, Richard said during a break while Ethan was getting water, where exactly did you train? This level of expertise doesn't happen overnight. Lauren's expression shifted, the professional mask slipping back into place. I told you my background wasn't up for discussion. Even when it's clearly world-class, Ethan's made more progress in one session than he has in months of traditional therapy. Progress that could disappear if we don't maintain consistency and appropriate boundaries. Lauren replied firmly, but Richard caught the flash of pride in her eyes at his acknowledgement of her skill. Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan's excited voice. "Lauren, watch this!" He was attempting the core engagement exercise on his own, his technique imperfect, but his determination absolute. "Excellent work, Ethan. You're getting the hang of it," Lauren encouraged, then turned back to Richard with a softer expression. "He's remarkable, you know. His neuroplasticity is exceptional for his condition." "Neuroplasticity," Richard repeated. "That's not basic physical therapy terminology." Lauren realized she'd revealed more specialized knowledge and looked away. "I read a lot." "Lauren," Richard said gently, "whatever happened in your past, whatever made you leave medicine, it doesn't change the fact that you have a gift. Ethan responds to you like no other therapist we've worked with. Sometimes gifts come with prices that are too high to pay." Lauren replied quietly, watching Ethan practice his exercises with focused determination. Richard wanted to push for more information, but something in Lauren's tone warned him off. Instead, he said, "What matters is that you're helping him now. Thank you." Lauren looked surprised by his restraint, as if she'd expected more interrogation about her background. "You're welcome. Same time next week." "Absolutely. And Lauren, whatever you used to do, wherever you trained, you're exactly what Ethan needs now." As they packed up to leave, Ethan hugged Lauren goodbye with uninhibited affection. "Lauren, you are the best helper ever. Will you be my friend too, not just my teacher?" "Of course, sweetheart," Lauren replied, her professional demeanor melting completely in the face of Ethan's innocent request. Richard watched the interaction, struck by how naturally Lauren connected with Ethan, how her walls came down around his son's unguarded enthusiasm. He found himself wondering what it would take to earn that same unguarded response from the mysterious woman who was slowly working miracles with his child. Walking to their cars, Richard made a decision that surprised him. Instead of pressing Lauren for answers about her past, he would earn her trust the same way she was earning Ethan's progress, gradually, consistently, and with genuine respect for the boundaries she needed to maintain. But as he watched her drive away in a modest sedan that somehow seemed as carefully chosen as everything else about her presentation, Richard Bennett found himself hoping that trust would eventually include letting him understand the fascinating, guarded woman who was bringing light back into his son's world. Far across town, in a sleek office overlooking the Boston Harbor, Dr. Victoria Montgomery hung up her phone with a satisfied smile. The private investigator's report had confirmed her suspicions. Lauren Davis, formerly Dr. Lauren Reynolds, had resurfaced. Not only that, she was working with the son of Richard Bennett, one of the most powerful men in the medical industry. Dr. Montgomery, at 56, had spent decades building her reputation as a pioneering researcher in pediatric neurology. Her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer wardrobe projected the image of success she had sacrificed everything to achieve. The wall behind her desk displayed her numerous awards and honorary degrees. But none of that would matter if Lauren Reynolds decided to tell her side of the story. She opened the file on her desk, reviewing the documentation of the case that had destroyed Lauren's career 3 years ago. The photo showed a different woman, professionally dressed, confident, standing beside research awards and speaking at medical conferences. The face was unmistakably Lauren's, though back then she had worn her hair shorter and carried herself with the assurance of someone at the top of her field. Dr. Reynolds was always too idealistic for her own good, Montgomery murmured to herself. She never understood that medicine is as much a business as it is a calling. She pressed the intercom. "Get me Dr. Wilson. Tell him we have a problem with the Prometheus project. Our old friend has reappeared, and she's made a powerful new ally." Montgomery turned to look out over the harbor, where the afternoon sun glinted off the water. 7 years of research, millions in funding, and a pharmaceutical deal worth hundreds of millions were all at risk because one idealistic doctor couldn't understand how the world really worked. "Not this time, Lauren," she promised the empty room. "You won't destroy what I've built. Not again." The next 6 weeks brought a transformation in Ethan Bennett that no specialist or experimental treatment had achieved in 3 years. Each Saturday morning session at the community center became the highlight of their week, with Richard rearranging his typically rigid schedule to ensure nothing interfered. The boy who had once struggled with basic movements was now practicing complex exercises with growing confidence, his reliance on crutches diminishing with each passing day. Richard found himself taking Friday afternoons off for the first time in his career, using the time to review Ethan's progress and prepare questions for Lauren. The board members noticed the change in their CEO, exchanging knowing glances when he declined weekend meetings or rescheduled international calls that conflicted with Saturday mornings. If they suspected the changes were about more than just Ethan's therapy sessions, they kept their opinions to themselves. Lauren's methods were unlike anything Richard had encountered in his extensive search for treatments. She combined traditional physical therapy with techniques that seemed to address the neurological aspects of Ethan's condition in ways the specialists at Johns Hopkins and Mayo Clinic had never attempted. More importantly, she had a gift for making the challenging work feel like play, turning therapy into adventures that Ethan eagerly anticipated rather than dreaded. The key isn't forcing the body to comply, she explained during their fourth session, as Ethan practiced balancing on a wobble board. It's retraining the neural pathways to communicate more efficiently with the muscles. Richard absorbed her words, fascinated by the elegant simplicity of her approach. Why hasn't anyone else tried this, he asked, watching Ethan complete a task that would have been impossible a month ago. Lauren hesitated, her eyes darting away momentarily. Some have, but traditional medical establishments prefer pharmaceutical and surgical interventions. They're more profitable and easier to standardize. There was bitterness in her voice that she couldn't quite conceal, another clue to her mysterious past that Richard filed away without comment. A ritual developed naturally, therapy session at the community center followed by lunch at Charlie's Diner. At first, Richard told himself these meals were for Ethan's benefit, a reward for his hard work. But he couldn't deny the anticipation he felt each Saturday as they walked through the diner's door, the way his eyes searched for Lauren even when she wasn't serving their table. During their sixth week, Lauren surprised them by guiding Ethan through a new exercise involving rhythmic movements coordinated with breathing techniques. This strengthens the connection between your cerebellum and your motor cortex, she explained to Ethan, in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Like building a stronger bridge between the part of your brain that plans movements and the part that makes them happen. Richard observed from the side, struck by the depth of her knowledge. This wasn't just physical therapy. This was advanced neuroscience applied with precision and care. The realization that Lauren was hiding abilities far beyond what she'd admitted only deepened his curiosity about her true background. That evening, while Ethan excitedly demonstrated his new exercises for his nanny, Richard received an unexpected call from Dr. Lawrence. "Richard, the latest tests are puzzling," the neurologist said cautiously. Puzzling, how by Richard tensed, immediately fearing a setback. "Not in a negative way," Lawrence assured him quickly. "Quite the opposite. Ethan's neural activity patterns show significant changes. His proprioception markers have improved by 30%, and there's increased activity in areas of the brain typically resistant to conventional therapies." "That's good news, isn't it?" Richard asked, relief washing over him. "It's extraordinary news. I've never seen this kind of improvement with standard physical therapy." Lawrence paused. "You mentioned Ethan was working with a new therapist. I'd very much like to speak with them about their methodology." Richard hesitated, uncertain how to explain Lauren's unusual situation. "Let me check with them first. Their approach is somewhat unconventional." "Unconventional or not, it's working," Lawrence replied, "and that's all that matters." After hanging up, Richard stood at his living room window, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkle below. Lawrence's confirmation of Ethan's improvement validated what his eyes had been telling him for weeks. Whatever Lauren's secrets, her methods were undeniably effective. "Your tie is crooked," Jessica noted one Friday afternoon as Richard was preparing to leave the office early. He rarely left before 7, but tomorrow was Saturday, and he needed to review the latest neurologist's report before Ethan's session with Lauren. "What tie?" Richard glanced down, realizing he wasn't wearing one at all. When had he stopped wearing ties on Fridays? The Richard Bennett of 3 months ago wouldn't have been caught dead in the office without a perfectly knotted Hermes. Jessica smiled knowingly but said nothing, simply handing him the folder of medical reports he'd requested. "The board meeting is moved to Tuesday," Richard reminded her as he took the folder, "and I'll be unavailable tomorrow until at least 2. Community Center and Charlie's Diner." Jessica nodded. "It's already blocked on your calendar. Permanent Saturday morning appointment." Richard paused. Had he made the sessions with Lauren a permanent fixture in his calendar? The realization that he was restructuring his life around these weekly meetings with a waitress would have alarmed him once. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. At the community center the following morning, Lauren greeted them with her usual professional warmth, but Richard noticed something different in her demeanor. She seemed more relaxed, less guarded. The rigid boundaries she'd initially maintained were softening, revealing glimpses of the woman beneath the careful facade. "Ethan, show Lauren what you did yesterday," Richard encouraged as they settled into the therapy space. Beaming with pride, Ethan set one crutch aside and walked across the room using only a single support. His gait was still uneven, but the improvement from 6 weeks ago was remarkable. "That's incredible." Lauren's face lit up with genuine joy. "Your proprioception has improved dramatically." "How does it feel?" "Like my legs are actually listening to me now," Ethan replied using one of Lauren's favorite expressions. Richard watched the exchange with a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with a gratitude so profound it bordered on reverence. For the first time since Claire's death, he wasn't carrying the weight of Ethan's condition alone. For the first time in years, he had hope. After the session, as Ethan practiced his new exercises independently, Richard found himself standing beside Lauren, both of them watching the boy with matching expressions of pride. "Thank you," Richard said softly. "I don't think you understand what you've given us." Lauren turned to him, her emerald eyes serious. "I do understand. That's why I agreed to help despite the risks." The statement hung between them, an unintentional revelation that Lauren immediately seemed to regret. Richard wanted to ask what risks she meant, but he remembered their agreement. No questions about her past. Instead, he offered her something he rarely gave anyone: vulnerability. "Before Claire died, I thought I could control everything with enough money and power. Afterward, I realized how helpless I truly was. I couldn't save her. I couldn't help Ethan. All my resources, my connections, my influence, worthless when it mattered most." Lauren's expression softened. "Richard, no one person can control everything, no matter how wealthy or powerful. Sometimes the best we can do is find the right people to trust." "Like you, oh?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Lauren held his gaze, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "I'm just doing what I can to help Ethan. That's all." But they both knew it wasn't all. Something was developing between them, a connection neither had anticipated or sought. For Richard, who had kept the world at arm's length since Claire's death, the feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. The moment was broken by Ethan calling out, wanting to show them a new variation on his exercise. The intimate atmosphere dissolved, but something had shifted between them. A door had opened just a crack. At Charlie's diner afterward, Lauren joined them during her break, as had become their custom. The conversation flowed easily, mostly centered on Ethan's progress in his upcoming school science fair. Richard found himself laughing more than he had in years, the weight of running a medical empire temporarily forgotten in the simple pleasure of a shared meal. "Excuse me," a man's voice interrupted their conversation. Lauren Reynolds." The color drained from Lauren's face as she looked up at the Asian man standing beside their booth. He was in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a suit that Richard recognized as custom-tailored from the same shop he frequented. "Dr. Chen," Lauren's voice was barely audible. I I didn't expect to see you here." "Nor I, Yuki," the man replied, his expression a mixture of shock and concern. "Especially not like this." He gestured vaguely at her waitress uniform. Richard's mind raced. Dr. Chen, Lauren Reynolds. The pieces were starting to fall into place. "Robert," Lauren said quickly, "this is Richard Bennett and his son Ethan." "Richard, this is Dr. Robert Chen. We used to, work together." Dr. Chen's eyes widened further as he recognized Richard. "Mr. Bennett, of course. Your reputation precedes you. Bennett Medical is doing groundbreaking work in neurological implants, if I'm not mistaken." "That's right," Richard replied cautiously, watching Lauren's increasingly panicked expression. "How do you know, Lauren?" Before Chen could answer, Lauren stood abruptly. "I should get back to work. My break's over." She hurried away, disappearing into the kitchen. Dr. Chen watched her go with a troubled expression. "Mr. Bennett, I don't mean to pry, but do you know who she is?" "She's helping my son with physical therapy," Richard replied carefully. "She mentioned she used to work in pediatric neurology." Chen's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. Pediatric neurology. Lauren Reynolds was the most promising neurological researcher of her generation. She was developing revolutionary treatments for childhood motor disorders until he trailed off, suddenly aware he might be saying too much. Until what Dr. Chen, Richard's voice was deceptively calm, but his mind was racing. Neurological researcher. Childhood motor disorders. Exactly what Ethan suffered from. It's not my place, Chen said, glancing toward the kitchen oven. But if she's working with your son, you should know who you're dealing with. The Lauren Reynolds I knew wouldn't be serving coffee unless something went catastrophically wrong. Chen pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Richard. I'm speaking at Columbia Medical Center tomorrow. If you want to know more about Lauren's research, particularly Project Prometheus, call me. Project Prometheus, Richard repeated, but Chen was already moving toward the exit. Just be careful, Mr. Bennett, Chen said over his shoulder. There are powerful people who wanted Lauren's work buried. For good reason. Daddy, who was that man? Why did he make Lauren upset? Ethan asked after Chen had departed. I'm not sure, buddy, Richard replied, his eyes still fixed on the kitchen door where Lauren had disappeared. But I think we need to find out. When Lauren returned 10 minutes later, her professional mask was firmly back in place, though Richard could see the strain around her eyes. She deflected his gentle inquiries, focusing entirely on Ethan until their meal was finished. As they were leaving, she slipped Richard a note. Not safe to talk here. They might be watching. Back in his penthouse that evening, after Ethan was asleep, Richard sat in his office with a glass of scotch, contemplating the name Lauren Reynolds and the cryptic warning in her note. He had promised not to investigate her past, but that was before he knew she might have been a neurological researcher specializing in conditions like Ethan's. Before he knew she was hiding her true identity. Before he knew she feared being watched. He opened his laptop, hesitated, then typed, Dr. Lauren Reynolds, neurologist, into the search bar. The results loaded instantly. The first image took his breath away. Lauren in a white lab coat accepting an award at a medical conference. Her hair was shorter, her posture more confident, but it was unmistakably her. The caption read, Dr. Lauren Reynolds receives the Lassiter Award for Innovation in Pediatric Neurology 21. Richard clicked through news articles, medical journal citations, and conference presentations. Lauren Reynolds had been a rising star, a brilliant researcher developing new approaches to treating neurological motor disorders in children. Her work had been groundbreaking, potentially revolutionary. Then he found it. A news article dated 3 years ago, promising researcher faces malpractice investigation after patient suffers permanent paralysis. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he clicked the link. The article detailed allegations that Dr. Lauren Reynolds had implemented an untested treatment protocol on an 8-year-old patient named Sophia Martinez, resulting in permanent paralysis. The medical board had revoked her license pending investigation. There were no follow-up articles, no resolution reported in the media. It was as if Lauren Reynolds had simply vanished from the medical world after the scandal. As he dug deeper, Richard noticed something odd. The reports about Lauren's case came from only 3 sources, all with connections to Boston Medical Research Foundation, a major funding body for neurological research. The foundation's board included a name Richard recognized, Dr. Victoria Montgomery, head of pediatric neurology at Boston Children's Hospital, and a frequent recipient of their grants. Richard was about to close the laptop when his email alert chimed. A new message from an address he didn't recognize, with the subject line, regarding your son's new therapist, urgent medical ethics concern. His blood ran cold as he opened the message. Mr. Bennett, I feel compelled to warn you about Lauren Reynolds currently using the alias Davis. 3 years ago, Dr. Reynolds was stripped of her medical license following a catastrophic patient outcome at Boston Children's Hospital. Her experimental treatment protocol resulted in permanent paralysis for an 8-year-old patient. The family's lawsuit revealed gross negligence and falsified research data. I'm shocked to learn she somehow gained access to your son. Please protect Ethan before history repeats itself. A concerned medical professional. Attached were what appeared to be court documents, medical board findings, and news articles detailing the malpractice case that had destroyed Lauren's career and reputation. Richard's investigative instincts kicked in. The timing was too convenient. Just hours after Chen recognized Lauren, an anonymous warning appeared in his inbox. He examined the email header information, looking for clues about the sender. The IP address traced back to a server in Boston, not far from Boston Children's Hospital. As he reviewed the attached documents, Richard noticed inconsistencies. The court filings appeared authentic, but several pages seemed to have been selectively included, breaking the narrative flow. The medical board findings contained references to evidence not included in the attached exhibits. His phone rang, startling him. It was Jessica. "Sir, I'm sorry to call so late, but you asked me to monitor mentions of Bennett Medical in the press. There's a situation developing that you should be aware of." "What is it?" Richard asked, his voice tense. "A reporter from the Medical Ethics Journal is asking for comment on your association with Dr. Lauren Reynolds. They're running a story Monday about disgraced doctors finding employment through powerful connections. Your name and Ethan's are mentioned." Richard's jaw clenched. Someone was orchestrating this, moving pieces on a chessboard he couldn't fully see. "Thank you, Jessica. No comment for now. I'll handle this personally." After hanging up, he stared at the email again, at the convenient timing at the anonymous sender. His business instincts, honed through years of corporate battles and takeover attempts, were screaming that this was more than it appeared. He picked up Dr. Chen's business card, contemplating his next move. Chen had mentioned Project Prometheus, a name not found in any of the articles about Lauren's downfall. Whatever it was, it might be the key to understanding what really happened. His secure phone line rang, the one only 5 people had the number for. His head of security, Jessica, his lawyer, his sister, and Ethan's doctor. "Bennett," he answered tersely. "Richard, it's Lawrence. I just received a strange call from someone at Boston Children's Hospital warning me about a Dr. Lauren Reynolds. They said she's working with Ethan without a license." Richard's grip tightened on the phone. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I said I'd need to review Ethan's treatment records before commenting." Lawrence paused. "Richard, is this the therapist who's been helping Ethan? The one showing remarkable results?" "Yes," Richard admitted. "But the situation is complicated. Lawrence, I need you to trust me on this. Don't share any information about Ethan's treatment with anyone until we talk." "Of course," Lawrence agreed. "But Richard, if she's practicing without a license—" "I know the risks," Richard cut him off. "Just give me time to sort this out." After ending the call, Richard dialed Lauren's number. It rang several times before she answered. "Richard?" Her voice was wary, cautious. "Is everything all right with Ethan?" "No games, Lauren. Or should I call you Dr. Reynolds? We need to talk. Now." The silence stretched so long Richard thought she might have hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was resigned. "How did you find out?" "That's not important. What matters is that you lied to me. You've been treating my son under false pretenses. You lost your medical license after paralyzing a child with an experimental treatment." "It wasn't like that." Lauren's voice cracked with emotion. "Please let me explain." "I'm listening." Richard's tone was ice cold, but some part of him was desperate to hear an explanation that would make sense, that would allow him to trust her again. "Not over the phone," Lauren insisted. "This isn't a conversation we can have remotely. Meet me at Riverside Park by the 79th Street boat basin." "In an hour." "Fine," Richard agreed, already reaching for his jacket. "But Lauren, if you're not completely honest with me, I'll make sure you never work in medicine again. Officially or unofficially." "I understand," she replied softly. "Just come alone. And Richard, be careful who you trust." The warning lingered in his mind as he rode the elevator down to the garage where his driver waited. Be careful who you trust. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Change of plans, Marcus," he told his driver. "Take me to Riverside Park, 79th Street entrance." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, but his eyes narrowed slightly in the rearview mirror. "Would you like me to alert security about this unscheduled stop?" Richard considered the request. Standard protocol for late-night deviations from his schedule included notifying his security team. But Lauren's warning about being careful echoed in his mind. "No," he decided. "This is personal. But stay alert." Riverside Park was quiet this late in the evening, the paths illuminated by scattered lampposts. Richard found Lauren sitting on a bench overlooking the Hudson River, her posture rigid with tension. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without her waitress uniform or athletic clothes, she looked different, vulnerable. "Thank you for coming," she said as he approached, not turning to look at him. "I'm here for Ethan," Richard replied, remaining standing. "He's made real progress with you. I need to understand if you're a danger to him." Lauren finally turned to face him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I would never harm Ethan, or any child. I became a doctor to help children like him. That's all I've ever wanted. Then explain the Martinez case, Richard demanded. Explain how an 8-year-old girl ended up paralyzed under your care. Lauren took a deep breath, steeling herself. Sophia Martinez had the same condition as Ethan, but more advanced. Her parents had tried everything, just like you. They came to me as a last resort because my research showed promise. I developed a protocol that combined neurofeedback techniques with targeted physical therapy. It was working, Richard. For 2 months, Sophia showed remarkable improvement. Then what happened? I was called away for a conference presentation. Dr. Victoria Montgomery, my department head, insisted on taking over Sophia's care for the 3 days I was gone. When I returned, but Sophia couldn't move her legs. Tests showed damage to her spinal cord that wasn't there before. Richard frowned. You're saying Dr. Montgomery was responsible. I'm saying something happened while I was away. When I raised concerns suggesting we investigate what went wrong, Montgomery and the hospital administration closed ranks. Suddenly, there were records showing I had authorized medication changes that I never approved, documentation of procedures I never performed. That's a serious accusation, Richard said, his business mind analyzing the situation. Why would Montgomery sabotage her own department's success? Lauren's laugh was bitter. 3 days after my license was revoked, Montgomery and 2 colleagues filed patents for treatments nearly identical to my research. A month later, they received a $12 million grant to develop them. My research, Richard, my life's work. The pieces were starting to fit together in Richard's mind. Medical research was big business, worth billions in patents and grants. It wasn't inconceivable that someone would destroy a colleague's career to steal promising research. Even if that's true, Richard said, still cautious. Why hide? Why not fight the accusations? I tried. Lauren's voice broke. But Montgomery had connections throughout the medical establishment. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. My own attorney advised me to accept the loss of my license to avoid criminal charges. Criminal charges, Richard for work I knew was helping children. Richard's mind flashed to the anonymous email, the sudden media interest. Someone knows you're working with Ethan, someone who wants to make sure you stay discredited. Lauren nodded grimly. Montgomery, it has to be. If my techniques with Ethan prove successful, it raises questions about what really happened with Sophia. Why did Chen mention Project Prometheus? Richard asked, remembering the business card in his pocket. Lauren tensed visibly. How do you know about Prometheus? Chen told me to ask about it, said it was connected to your research. Lauren glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. Prometheus was the code name for my comprehensive treatment protocol. The neural retraining techniques I've been using with Ethan are just a small part of it. The complete protocol could potentially reverse neurological motor disorders entirely, not just improve them. And Montgomery stole it, Richard concluded. Yes, but her version is flawed. She doesn't understand the underlying principles. She's implementing it incorrectly, which is why their clinical trials are showing only modest improvements compared to what I achieved with Sophia before. Lauren trailed off, the memory clearly painful. Richard paced along the path, processing everything. His instincts told him Lauren was telling the truth. The timing was too convenient, the anonymous warnings too calculated. I should have told you everything from the beginning, Lauren admitted. But I needed the work at Charlie's, and I was afraid you wouldn't let me help Ethan if you knew my past. You're right, I wouldn't have, Richard acknowledged. But now I've seen the results. I've watched my son improve week after week. He sat beside her on the bench, his anger giving way to a strategic clarity. I believe you, Lauren, but believing you isn't enough. If we're going to fight this, we need evidence. Evidence was destroyed years ago, Lauren said hopelessly. The Martinez family disappeared after the settlement. Montgomery made sure every avenue was closed. You forget who you're talking to, Richard said, a hint of the ruthless CEO returning to his voice. I didn't build Bennett Medical by giving up when things got difficult. Lauren looked at him with cautious hope. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we find the truth about what happened to Sophia Martinez, about Montgomery's research, about all of it. Richard's expression hardened with determination. But first I need to know everything. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Before Lauren could respond, Richard's phone vibrated with a text from Marcus. Sir, black SUV circling the park entrance. Two men watching the path. Security concern. Richard showed Lauren the message. We need to move. Now. They left the bench walking casually toward the Southern Park exit while Richard texted Marcus to meet them there. Lauren kept her head down her shoulder, brushing against Richard's as they moved through the shadows between lampposts. This is what my life has been for 3 years, she said quietly. Always looking over my shoulder, never staying in one place too long. That ends now, Richard promised, but we need somewhere safe to talk to plan our next move. As they approached the exit, Richard spotted the black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted. Two men in dark clothing stood nearby, attempting to look casual, but clearly watching the park entrance. My driver is at the south exit, Richard murmured, but we need a diversion. Lauren assessed the situation with surprising tactical awareness. There's a group of college students coming up the path behind us. If we join them until we're past the SUV, Richard nodded, impressed by her quick thinking. They slowed their pace, allowing the laughing group of 20-somethings to catch up to them. Blending in with the students, they passed the SUV without drawing attention, then quickly broke away toward where Marcus waited with the car. Once safely inside the Bentley, Richard instructed Marcus to take a circuitous route back to his building, watching carefully for any signs of being followed. Who were those men? He asked Lauren. Montgomery employs private security, she replied. Former military, very professional. They're not above intimidation, but they avoid direct confrontation. How would they know we were meeting? Lauren's expression darkened. My phone might be compromised, or someone at the diner overheard us. Montgomery has resources. Richard frowned, realizing how deep this conspiracy might go. We need a secure location to continue this conversation. Your penthouse should be safe, Lauren suggested. High security, limited access. Richard nodded. And I want to hear everything about Project Prometheus. If Montgomery stole your research, there must be a way to prove it. As Marcus navigated the late-night Manhattan traffic, Richard noticed a black sedan 3 cars behind them, matching their turns too precisely to be coincidence. We're being followed, he said quietly to Lauren. She tensed but didn't turn to look. What do we do? Richard pressed the intercom. Marcus, we have a tail. Execute Protocol 3. Without acknowledging the instruction, Marcus made a sudden turn onto a side street, then another following a pre-planned evasion route. The black sedan initially kept pace, but after a series of rapid maneuvers through narrow streets, in a brief stretch going the wrong way down a one-way street, they lost their pursuer. Your driver seems experienced with evasive maneuvers, Lauren observed. Marcus is ex-Secret Service, Richard explained. Part of my security team since Ethan was born. They rode in silence for several minutes until Marcus announced they were clear and proceeding to the penthouse. Richard studied Lauren's profile in the dim light of the car. She was exhausted, the weight of 3 years on the run, evident in the lines around her eyes. Yet there was a resilience to her that he admired, a determination that matched his own. Lauren, he said softly, whatever happens next, you're not alone in this anymore. She turned to him, surprise and something deeper flickering across her face. Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know? Your reputation, your company, possibly even your safety. Richard thought about Ethan's improving condition, about the light returning to his son's eyes, about the way Lauren had given them both hope when hope seemed lost. Because some things are worth fighting for, he said simply. Back at Richard's penthouse, after checking on a sleeping Ethan, they sat in his home office plotting strategy. Lauren had been hesitant to come to his home at first, but Richard insisted they needed privacy to discuss their approach. Tell me everything you remember about Sofia Martinez's case, Richard said, opening a notebook. Every detail, no matter how small. Lauren closed her eyes, accessing memories she'd tried to suppress for 3 years. Sofia was 8, Colombian American, referred to me by Dr. Patel at NYU after conventional treatments failed. Initial assessment showed severe motor impairment, similar to Ethan, but more advanced. Parents' names, Richard asked, taking notes. Maria and Carlos Martinez. They were desperate, willing to try anything. Maria was a teacher, Carlos worked in construction. They'd mortgaged their home twice to pay for Sofia's treatments. Were they supportive of your approach? Lauren nodded. Completely. Maria kept detailed journals of Sofia's progress. She documented everything. Those journals would have shown the steady improvement before Montgomery took over. Richard wrote Martinez journals and circled it. What happened to them? I don't know. After the incident, the family stopped communicating with me. My understanding is they received a substantial settlement that included a non-disclosure agreement. Hospital records, altered, Lauren said bitterly. Montgomery had administrative privileges. She could change anything in the system. Not everything, Richard said thoughtfully. Medical systems have audit trails, backup servers, redundancies. Changes leave fingerprints if you know where to look. Lauren looked at him with growing hope. You think we could prove the records were tampered with? With the right expertise, yes. Richard made another note. What about your research? Did you keep backups? I had an encrypted drive with all my original data, but it was in my office when they locked me out. Montgomery would have destroyed it immediately. Richard considered this. What about your treatment protocols, the ones you're using with Ethan? Are they documented somewhere? Lauren hesitated. I recreated them from memory. I've been keeping detailed notes on Ethan's progress building the evidence base from scratch. Where are these notes? In a secure cloud account, and paper backups in my apartment. Richard nodded approvingly. Smart. We'll need those. He paused, then asked the question that had been bothering him. Lauren, what exactly did Montgomery do to Sophia? Lauren's expression darkened. Based on the symptoms and timing, I believe she administered a medication that was contraindicated with my treatment protocol. Something that would cause an adverse reaction affecting the spinal cord. That's not malpractice, Richard said gravely. That's criminal assault. Yes, Lauren agreed quietly, but without proof, it's just a disgraced doctor making wild accusations. Richard closed his notebook decisively. Then we get proof. I'll hire the best private investigator in New York, someone who specializes in medical cases. And until then, Lauren asked, until then you continue working with Ethan. We don't change anything outwardly. Lauren looked surprised. You still want me to treat Ethan? Even knowing all this? Especially knowing all this, Richard said firmly. Ethan is improving under your care. That's what matters to me as his father. The relief on Lauren's face was palpable. Thank you for believing me. You don't know what that means after 3 years of being treated like a pariah. Their eyes met across the desk, the connection between them deepening with shared purpose and growing trust. Richard felt an impulse to reach for her hand but restrained himself. This wasn't the time. You should stay here tonight, he said instead. The guest room is prepared. It's late, and I don't like the idea of you going back to your apartment alone while Montgomery is making moves. Lauren looked like she was about to refuse, then nodded. You're right, it's safer here. She paused. What do we tell Ethan? The truth, Richard replied without hesitation. A simplified version. That you're a doctor who helps children like him and some bad people tried to stop you. But we're going to make it right. Lauren smiled, the first genuine smile since Chen had recognized her at the diner. He'll understand that. He's remarkably perceptive. Like his mother, Richard said softly, a familiar ache in his chest at the mention of Claire. You miss her very much, Lauren observed. Every day. Richard's voice was low. Claire would have known what to do about all this. She was the ethical compass in our relationship. I think you're doing exactly what she would have wanted, Lauren said. Standing up for the truth, protecting your son. Richard wasn't sure when they had moved closer together, but suddenly Lauren was standing beside him, her presence a comfort he hadn't realized he needed. Get some rest, he said, reluctantly breaking the moment. Tomorrow we start fighting back. After showing Lauren to the guest room, Richard returned to his office and picked up the phone. It was late, but this couldn't wait. Michael Torres Investigations, answered a gruff voice. Torres, it's Bennett. I need your services. Medical fraud case highest priority. Bennett, the former FBI agent acknowledged, must be serious if you're calling at midnight. What's the target? Dr. Victoria Montgomery, Boston Children's Hospital. I need everything. Financial records, communications, medical cases. Focus on the Prometheus project in a patient named Sophia Martinez from 3 years ago. Montgomery's connected, Torres warned. This won't be easy. That's why I'm calling you, Richard replied. Price is no object. I need results fast. After ending the call, Richard stood at his window overlooking the city lights. Lauren Reynolds. The woman was a contradiction, brilliant but vulnerable, determined yet haunted. He had promised Claire on her deathbed that he would do anything to help Ethan. That promise had led him to Lauren and now to a battle against powerful forces in the medical establishment. For the first time in years, Richard felt truly alive, not just existing in the shadow of grief, but fighting for something that mattered. Fighting for Ethan's future, for Lauren's vindication, for the truth itself. As he turned away from the window, his eyes fell on Claire's photograph. "I think you would have liked her," he said quietly to the smiling image of his wife. "She has your same dedication to healing." His secure phone rang again, an unknown number. Richard hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Bennett," said a voice he didn't recognize. "We haven't met, but I believe we have a mutual interest in Dr. Reynolds." "Who is this?" Richard demanded. "A friend, someone who knows what really happened to Sofia Martinez." The voice was male-educated with a hint of an accent Richard couldn't place. "If you want the truth about Project Prometheus, check your email in 5 minutes. And Mr. Bennett trusts no one at Boston Children's. The conspiracy goes deeper than you imagine." The line went dead before Richard could respond. He stared at the phone, wondering if this was another trap or a genuine ally emerging from the shadows. 5 minutes later, his email chimed. The message contained only an encrypted file and a password. Richard entered the password, and his screen filled with documents. Internal memos from Boston Children's Hospital, emails between Montgomery and hospital administrators, and most damning of all, the original unaltered medical records for Sofia Martinez, showing unauthorized medication changes during the exact period Lauren was away. At the bottom of the email was a simple message: "There are others who want justice. You are not alone in this fight." In Boston, Victoria Montgomery sat in her darkened office, a glass of scotch in her hand. The secure phone line on her desk connected her to someone she had hoped never to call again. "She's with Bennett," she said without preamble, "and he's not backing off despite the warnings." "That's unfortunate," replied a male voice. "Bennett has resources we didn't anticipate." "He's a businessman, not a doctor," Montgomery dismissed. "He doesn't understand what's at stake. Nevertheless, he's dangerous. The Prometheus trials begin next month. We can't risk delays or investigations." Montgomery swirled her scotch, considering options. "What do you suggest?" "Escalation, sir," the voice replied coldly. "If Bennett won't respond to warnings, perhaps he'll respond to consequences." "The boy?" Montgomery asked, her voice carefully neutral. "No," came the immediate response. "Children are off limits, but there are other pressure points. His company, his reputation. The media is already asking questions. We can provide answers that serve our purposes." Montgomery nodded to herself. "I'll handle it. Reynolds won't destroy everything we've built. Not this time." As she hung up, she opened her laptop to review the latest Prometheus trial data. The results were good, but not exceptional. Not like the remarkable improvements Lauren had achieved with her original protocol. The protocol Montgomery had altered just enough to claim as her own, but not enough to maintain its full efficacy. "You should have taken the money and disappeared, Lauren," she murmured to the empty room. "Some fights aren't worth the cost of winning." Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Security team lost Bennett and Reynolds at Riverside Park. They returned to his penthouse." Montgomery frowned. Bennett was proving more resourceful than expected. She typed a response. "Implement Plan B. Full media exposure tomorrow." She closed her laptop and finished her scotch, unaware that at that very moment, the evidence that would destroy her career was being downloaded by a man who had built an empire by taking down opponents who underestimated him. And in a guest room in Richard Bennett's penthouse, Lauren Reynolds slept peacefully for the first time in 3 years, no longer alone in her fight for justice and redemption. Richard awoke to the sound of laughter from the kitchen, a sound so foreign in his penthouse that for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Sunlight streamed through the windows he'd forgotten to close, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He checked his watch, 7:23 a.m. He'd fallen asleep at his desk, the encrypted files from the anonymous source still open on his laptop. The laughter rang out again, unmistakably Ethan's, followed by a woman's warm chuckle. Lauren. The events of the previous night came rushing back, the revelation about her true identity, the confrontation at Riverside Park, the mysterious files that might hold the key to clearing her name. Richard straightened his rumpled shirt and made his way to the kitchen, where he found an unexpected domestic scene. Lauren, still in yesterday's clothes, but with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, was teaching Ethan how to flip pancakes. His son, wearing pajamas and an oversized apron, was giggling as batter splattered across the counter. "Daddy," Ethan exclaimed upon seeing him. "Lauren's making breakfast. Did you know she can cook too? She says it's just chemistry in the kitchen." "Good morning," Lauren said, a hint of uncertainty in her eyes as she gauged Richard's reaction to finding her so at home in his kitchen. "I hope you don't mind. Ethan was up early and he was hungry." "I don't mind at all," Richard replied, surprised by how much he meant it. The sight of them together, comfortable and happy, stirred something long dormant in his chest. "It smells wonderful." "Lauren says she's actually a doctor, not just a helper," Ethan announced, carefully flipping another pancake, "and that some mean people tried to stop her from helping kids like me." Richard shot Lauren a questioning look. She shrugged apologetically. "He asked why I was here so early. I told him the truth like we discussed." "And what do you think about that buddy?" Richard asked his son cautiously. Ethan considered the question with the serious expression he reserved for important matters. "I think those people are stupid. Lauren's the best doctor ever. She's helping me walk better when nobody else could." The simple logic of a child, Richard thought. If only the medical board could see Lauren's work through Ethan's eyes. "I also promised him," Lauren added, lowering her voice, "that no matter what happens with those mean people, I'll keep helping him, even if I can't be his official doctor." The implied question in her statement was clear. Was Richard still committed to their fight after a night to reconsider? Or would he take the safer path, distancing himself and Ethan from the controversy? "Lauren showed me the exercises we're going to do today," Ethan continued excitedly. "She says I might be ready to try walking without any crutches soon." Richard felt his resolve hardening. Whatever risks lay ahead, he couldn't deny his son this chance. Not when Ethan was making progress that 3 years of conventional treatment had failed to achieve. "That's fantastic, buddy," he said, ruffling Ethan's hair. Then, meeting Lauren's eyes with deliberate certainty, he added, "And don't worry about those mean people. Your dad is pretty good at dealing with bullies." The relief on Lauren's face was palpable, her shoulders relaxing as she turned back to the stove. "Pancakes are ready. Who's hungry?" Over breakfast, Richard shared a simplified version of their plan with Ethan. They would be helping Lauren prove she was a good doctor, which meant she might need to stay with them sometimes for safety. Ethan accepted this news with enthusiasm, already planning to show Lauren his extensive toy collection and video games. When Ethan left to get dressed, Richard lowered his voice. "I found something last night, after you went to bed." Lauren's fork paused midway to her mouth. "What kind of something?" "Someone sent me files, medical records, internal memos from Boston Children's Hospital, evidence that supports your version of events." Richard studied her reaction carefully. "The records show medication changes for Sophia Martinez during the exact period you were away. Changes authorized under your credentials but implemented by Montgomery." Lauren's hand trembled, sending her fork clattering to the plate. That's impossible. Those records were altered years ago. I tried to access them myself and was told they'd been purged from the system." "Apparently someone preserved the originals," Richard replied. "Someone who wants to see Montgomery exposed as much as we do." "Who?" "I don't know. The message was anonymous." Richard described the cryptic phone call and subsequent email. "Whoever it is has inside access to Boston Children's systems." Lauren's mind raced visibly. It could be Dr. Wilson. He was always uncomfortable with how things were handled. Or maybe Nurse Jenkins from neurology. She knew I wouldn't have ordered those medications. Whoever it is, they've given us a starting point. Richard reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Lauren, this is real evidence. With this and Torres's investigation, we might have enough to approach the medical board for a review of your case." Hope flickered in Lauren's eyes, quickly tempered by caution born of years of disappointment. "Montgomery has powerful friends on the board. They'll try to discredit the evidence. Then we build a case so strong they can't ignore it." Richard's phone vibrated with an incoming call. "Speaking of which, that's probably Torres now." But it wasn't Torres. It was Jessica, her voice tense with unusual urgency. "Sir, I think you should turn on the new Channel 4. Richard activated the kitchen television with a remote, and Lauren gasped as her own face appeared on screen. It was her professional headshot from Boston Children's Hospital, side by side, with a current image clearly taken outside Charlie's diner. The headline banner read, "Disgraced doctor treating millionaire son without license. Montgomery moved faster than we anticipated," Richard said grimly as the reporter detailed allegations that Lauren Reynolds, stripped of her medical license after a botched experimental treatment, was now providing unauthorized medical care to the son of Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Medical. This is Channel 4's exclusive interview with Dr. Victoria Montgomery, head of pediatric neurology at Boston Children's Hospital, the reporter announced. Montgomery appeared on screen, the perfect picture of professional concern, in her white coat with a stethoscope draped around her neck. Her silver hair was immaculately styled, her expression one of practiced compassion. "I felt ethically obligated to come forward," she told the reporter. "When I learned that Lauren Reynolds was treating a vulnerable child without licensing or oversight, I couldn't remain silent. The safety of that child has to be the priority." "Dr. Montgomery," the reporter asked, "you were Dr. Reynolds' supervisor when the Martinez incident occurred. Can you tell us what happened?" Montgomery's expression shifted to somber regret. Lauren was a gifted researcher, but she became obsessed with proving her theories at any cost. She implemented an experimental protocol without proper testing or authorization. When it resulted in permanent harm to a patient, she refused to accept responsibility. "That's a lie," Lauren exclaimed, rising from her chair. "She's completely inverting what happened." "Of course she is," Richard said calmly. "She's controlling the narrative. It's what I would do in her position." On screen, the reporter continued. "We reached out to Richard Bennett for comment. A representative of Bennett Medical provided the following statement. Mr. Bennett is not aware of any unlicensed medical treatment being provided to his son. Ethan Bennett receives care from qualified specialists at multiple accredited institutions." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Jessica is good. That statement confirms nothing while appearing to deny everything." "Dr. Montgomery," the reporter pressed, "critics might say you have a conflict of interest given that you're currently leading clinical trials based on research similar to Dr. Reynolds' work." A flicker of annoyance crossed Montgomery's perfectly composed face. "The Prometheus protocol is the result of years of collaborative research by our entire department. Any suggestion that it was appropriated from Dr. Reynolds is categorically false and potentially libelous." "Prometheus protocol," Richard noted. "She's using your research name publicly now." "Because the trials are starting soon," Lauren realized. "They're moving to commercial application. That's why they're so desperate to keep me discredited." The report concluded with the reporter standing outside Bennett Medical's headquarters. "The medical ethics implications of this case are troubling. If a prominent healthcare CEO is knowingly employing an unlicensed practitioner to treat his own son, what oversight exists within his medical facilities?" For Channel 4 News, this is Sandra Williams reporting. Richard muted the television, his expression hardening into the cold calculation that had made him a feared opponent in corporate boardrooms. "They're not just attacking you anymore. They're coming after Bennett Medical." "Richard, I'm so sorry," Lauren began, but he cut her off with a dismissive gesture. "Don't apologize. This is exactly what I expected." He dialed Jessica's number. Jessica, who authorized that statement to Channel 4. "I did, sir," Jessica replied. "I thought it best to provide something non-committal until we had a strategy." "Good call. Schedule an emergency board meeting for noon today and get our PR team assembled immediately." "Already done, sir. They're waiting for your direction." "Tell them to prepare for full disclosure and counterattack. No defensive posturing." Richard ended the call and turned to Lauren. "Montgomery made her move. Now we make ours." "What are you planning?" Lauren asked, a mixture of hope and trepidation in her voice. "The truth, Lauren. We're going to tell the truth." Richard's smile held no warmth, only determination. "Montgomery expects me to distance myself from you to protect Bennett Medical. She's counting on me behaving like a typical CEO, but she's overlooked something critical." "What's that?" "I built my company by recognizing when to take calculated risks, by seeing value where others saw only liability." His eyes softened as they moved to the doorway where Ethan stood, confused by the tension in the room. "And by understanding what's truly important." Ethan approached cautiously. "Daddy Lauren, why are you on TV?" Richard knelt to his son's level. "Remember those mean people we talked about? The ones who tried to stop Lauren from helping kids like you, they're telling lies about her and about us. But we're going to fight back. We're going to tell everyone the truth. Like how Lauren's helping me walk better when the other doctors couldn't, Ethan asked innocently. Richard exchanged a glance with Lauren, a silent understanding passing between them. Exactly like that, buddy. In fact, you might be the most important part of our plan. The Bennett Medical Board meeting began precisely at noon, the tension palpable as Richard entered the conference room. 9 members of the board sat around the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed anger. The television in the corner was tuned to a financial news channel where Bennett Medical's stock price was displayed down 4.2% and falling. Gentlemen, ladies, Richard began without preamble. I assume you've all seen the news reports. Thomas Harrington, the longest-serving board member, leaned forward. Richard, what the hell is going on? We're getting calls from investors, partners, even the state medical licensing board. Is it true? Elaine Weber, the former pharmaceutical executive, asked directly. Are you allowing an unlicensed doctor to treat Ethan? Richard surveyed the room, measuring each face. These people weren't just board members. Most had been with him since the early days of Bennett Medical. Their concern was genuine, if primarily focused on the company's welfare. Lauren Reynolds has been providing physical therapy techniques to help Ethan with his motor skills, Richard confirmed. And yes, her medical license was revoked 3 years ago. But there's more to this story than what's being reported. He outlined the facts as he knew them. Lauren's groundbreaking research, Montgomery's apparent sabotage, the stolen Prometheus protocol, and the evidence suggesting Sophia Martinez's paralysis occurred under Montgomery's care, not Lauren's. So this is about clearing Dr. Reynolds' name, Harrington asked skeptically. It's about more than that, Richard countered. It's about exposing fraud and malpractice at one of the nation's leading children's hospitals. It's about a treatment protocol that could help thousands of children like Ethan being implemented incorrectly by the very people who stole it. And what does this have to do with Bennett Medical? Weber pressed. Our stock is tanking. Partners are questioning our commitment to ethical standards. That, Richard smiled thinly, is where the opportunity lies. He outlined his plan. Bennett Medical would publicly support Lauren Reynolds' petition for license reinstatement. They would fund an independent review of the Martinez case and the Prometheus protocol. Most boldly, they would announce a new pediatric neurology research division headed by Lauren Reynolds pending her reinstatement, focused on advancing the correct implementation of the treatment protocol she had developed. You want to double down, Harrington said incredulously. Instead of distancing yourself from this controversy, you want to place Bennett Medical at the center of it. Exactly, Richard confirmed. Montgomery expects me to retreat to protect our stock price and reputation in the short term. But what happens when her version of the Prometheus protocol shows limited efficacy in clinical trials, while we demonstrate superior results with the original methodology? What happens when the truth about the Martinez case emerges? If it emerges, Weber cautioned, Richard, you're betting the company's reputation on unproven allegations. Not unproven, Richard countered, nodding to Jessica, who distributed folders to each board member. These are copies of the evidence we've gathered. Medical records showing unauthorized medication changes. Internal memos discussing how to adapt Reynolds' research without credit. Financial transfers between the pharmaceutical company funding the Prometheus trials and Montgomery's personal foundation. The board members flipped through the documents in stunned silence. Torres has been busy, Harrington murmured, impressed despite himself. This goes beyond corporate rivalry, Richard continued. Children like Ethan, like Sophia Martinez, deserve the most effective treatments available. Right now, that's being deliberately withheld to protect patents and profits. It's still a massive risk, Weber insisted. Even with this evidence, Montgomery has institutional backing, media connections, and a 3-year head start on shaping the narrative. Which is why we need one more element, Richard acknowledged, something Montgomery can't counter with press releases or legal maneuvering. He pressed the intercom. Jessica, please bring them in. The conference room door opened, and Lauren entered, accompanied by Ethan, walking steadily with only one crutch, and a woman Richard had never met in person, but recognized immediately from photographs, Maria Martinez, mother of Sophia. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Richard said, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lauren Reynolds, my son Ethan, and Maria Martinez, whose daughter Sophia was at the center of the case that led to Dr. Reynolds' license revocation. Maria Martinez was a small woman with tired eyes that had seen too much suffering, but her spine was straight with determination as she faced the room of executives. Mrs. Martinez has agreed to break her non-disclosure agreement, Richard explained. She's willing to testify about Sophia's treatment under Dr. Reynolds, the improvement she witnessed before Dr. Montgomery's intervention, and the pressure she faced to support the malpractice narrative. They threatened to withdraw all medical support for Sophia if we didn't cooperate. Maria said, her voice soft but clear. They said Lauren was experimenting on our daughter, that she had caused the paralysis. But Sophia was getting better until Dr. Montgomery took over. I kept journals documenting every improvement. She placed a worn notebook on the conference table. This is my evidence, my daughter's truth. The room fell silent as the implications settled over the board members. Finally, Harrington spoke. Richard, you've always had good instincts. Sometimes they've seemed reckless, but they've generally proven correct in the long run. He glanced at the stock ticker still trending downward. But this is different. You're not just risking capital. You're putting your personal reputation, this company's standing, and most concerningly, your son's well-being on the line. Look at my son, Thomas, Richard replied quietly. All eyes turned to Ethan, who stood straighter than any of them had ever seen him. With a nod from Lauren, the boy carefully set aside his remaining crutch and took 6 unassisted steps across the conference room, his movement still awkward but unmistakably improved. 3 years of the best conventional treatment money could buy. Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, and he could barely stand without support. 6 weeks with Dr. Reynolds and he's walking. That's not anecdotal evidence. It's standing right in front of you. The boardroom remained silent, the members exchanging glances that shifted from skepticism to consideration. We need to vote, Weber finally said. This affects the entire company. No, Richard responded firmly. Bennett Medical is my company. I maintain controlling interest. I didn't call this meeting to seek permission, but to inform you of our direction and to ask for your support. He surveyed the faces around the table. Montgomery has attacked not just Lauren's reputation, but the ethical foundation of Bennett Medical itself. We either stand our ground and fight for the truth, or we concede that profit margins matter more than patient outcomes. Harrington sighed, then nodded slowly. You know I'm with you, Richard. Always have been. But this won't be just a corporate battle or a PR challenge. Montgomery has powerful connections throughout the medical establishment. This will get ugly. It already is ugly. Lauren spoke up, her professional confidence evident despite the circumstances. A child was harmed. A treatment that could help thousands has been corrupted. The truth has been buried for 3 years while I've been unable to practice medicine. She looked at each board member in turn. I understand the risks to your company. I understand if you need to protect your investments. But Richard is right about one thing. This is about more than stock prices or corporate reputation. Maria Martinez stepped forward. My Sophia still can't walk. The settlement paid for her care, but no amount of money can give her back what was taken. If there's even a chance that Dr. Reynolds' original treatment could help other children avoid Sophia's fate, don't you have an obligation to support it? The simple, devastating question hung in the air. Weber was the first to respond. I'll contact our legal team. If we're going public with these allegations, we need ironclad documentation and preparation for the inevitable lawsuits. One by one, the board members signaled their reluctant but firm support. As the meeting concluded, Richard pulled Jessica aside. Prepare a press conference for 4 p.m. today. We need to get ahead of this story. Here at headquarters, Jessica asked. No, Richard decided. At the community center where Lauren works with Ethan, and make sure the medical correspondents from every major network are there. As the board members filed out, Lauren approached Richard, her expression troubled. You didn't tell me you were bringing Maria Martinez in, she said quietly. I couldn't risk tipping off Montgomery, Richard explained. Torres found her 2 days ago living in Queens under her maiden name. She reached out as soon as she heard about the news reports. She kept her journals, Lauren said, still processing the revelation. All this time, she had the documentation that could have cleared my name. She was protecting her daughter, Richard reminded her gently. Montgomery threatened to withdraw Sophia's care if the family didn't cooperate with the official narrative. Lauren nodded understanding but still visibly shaken by coming face to face with her former patient's mother after 3 years. What happens now, she asked. Now, Richard said, gathering Ethan with one arm and guiding Lauren with the other, we prepare to tell your story to the world. The community center was transformed by 3:30 p.m., its modest therapy room, now crowded with cameras, lighting equipment, and reporters. Richard had insisted on this location deliberately. He wanted the world to see the simple, unassuming space where Lauren had been helping Ethan make remarkable progress. In the director's office, temporarily converted to a staging area, Lauren paced nervously while Richard conferred with the PR team and legal counsel. I haven't spoken publicly since the license hearing, she admitted when Richard finally joined her. What if I freeze? What if I can't explain the technical aspects clearly enough for the general public to understand? You won't be alone up there, Richard assured her. I'll handle the corporate messaging and the broad strokes. You focus on the medical facts on your treatment protocol. Maria will provide the emotional context about Sophia's experience. And Ethan? Lauren asked, glancing at the boy who was cheerfully charming the makeup artist, preparing him for the cameras. Ethan is our most powerful evidence, Richard said, but he'll only demonstrate his progress, not speak. I won't put him through questioning. Lauren nodded gratefully. Richard, I need to ask one more time. Are you certain about this? Montgomery will retaliate. This could damage Bennett Medical irreparably if we can't prove everything conclusively. Richard took her hands in his, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. Lauren, I've made my fortune by recognizing when the potential reward justifies the risk. But this isn't just about business calculations. This is about doing what's right. For Ethan, for Sophia, for all the children who could benefit from your work. Their eyes held for a long moment, the connection between them deepening beyond professional alliance or even friendship. In the crucible of crisis, something more profound was taking shape. The moment was broken by Jessica's discreet knock. 5 minutes, sir. The networks are all live. Richard squeezed Lauren's hands once more before releasing them. Ready to change the world, Dr. Reynolds. For the first time since he'd known her, Lauren's smile held no reservation, no shadow of past trauma. More than ready, Mr. Bennett. The press conference began precisely at 4 p.m., with Richard stepping to the podium as cameras flashed and reporters called questions. He raised his hands for silence, his commanding presence instantly controlling the room. Thank you for coming on such short notice. My name is Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Medical Group. I'm here today to address the allegations made this morning regarding my son's care and to share important information about a matter of significant public health interest. He proceeded with a measured factual account of how he had met Lauren at Charlie's Diner, her work with Ethan, and the gradual revelation of her true background. He neither sensationalized nor minimized the controversy, instead presenting it as what it was, a complex case of alleged medical misconduct, research theft, and institutional cover-up. Rather than respond to these allegations defensively or retreat behind corporate statements, I believe the public deserves full transparency. To that end, I've invited 3 people to speak today who can provide firsthand perspectives on what has become known as the Martinez case and the Prometheus Protocol. He introduced Lauren first, who approached the podium with the dignified professionalism that had once made her a rising star in her field. Despite her initial nervousness, she delivered a clear, compelling explanation of her research, the original Prometheus Protocol, and the specific ways in which the version now being prepared for clinical trials had been altered from her design. These modifications may seem subtle to non-specialists, she explained, displaying comparison charts on a screen behind her, but they fundamentally undermine the efficacy of the treatment. The neural retraining component has been reduced to a supplementary role rather than the core mechanism it was designed to be. She then detailed her work with Ethan, careful to characterize it as physical therapy techniques rather than medical treatment, while acknowledging that the distinction was precisely what Montgomery was challenging. I never misrepresented my licensing status to Mr. Bennett, she concluded. And while I understand the ethical concerns about practicing without a license, I could not in good conscience withhold techniques that might help a child when conventional treatments had failed. Maria Martinez spoke next, her simple, heartfelt testimony providing the emotional weight that balanced Lauren's technical presentation. She described Sophia's initial progress under Lauren's care, the sudden deterioration after Montgomery's intervention, and the pressure placed on her family to support the official narrative. They said if we didn't cooperate, Sophia would lose her care at Boston Children's. What choice did we have? Maria held up her journal. But I kept records. Every day, every improvement, every setback. The truth has been in these pages all along. Finally, Richard returned to the podium with Ethan by his side. The boy stood straight and proud, one hand resting lightly on his father's arm for balance, but otherwise supporting himself. 6 weeks ago, my son required 2 crutches to walk even short distances, Richard said simply. Today, as you can see, he requires minimal support. His neurologist has documented improvements in neural activity that conventional treatments failed to achieve in 3 years. He motioned to Ethan, who carefully walked a short distance across the platform. His movement labored but unmistakably improved. The cameras captured every step, every determined expression on the boy's face. Bennett Medical is announcing 3 initiatives today, Richard continued as Ethan returned to his side. First, we are establishing an independent review panel to examine all evidence related to the Martinez case and the development of the Prometheus protocol. Second, we are launching a new pediatric neurology research division focused on advancing Dr. Reynolds' original methodology. And third, we are formally supporting Dr. Reynolds' petition for license reinstatement based on new evidence suggesting her original revocation was based on falsified records. The room erupted with questions, but Richard raised his hand for silence once more. One final announcement. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Bennett Medical to focus on these initiatives in my son's care. While I maintain my position as chairman of the board, day-to-day operations will be managed by our current COO, Jessica Winters, who has my complete confidence. The shocking announcement sent reporters into a frenzy, cameras flashing, as Jessica stepped forward to stand beside Richard. Lauren's stunned expression matched those of the journalists. This decision, Richard continued over the commotion, reflects my personal commitment to seeing this matter through to its conclusion. It also ensures that Bennett Medical can continue its vital work without the distraction of what will undoubtedly be a challenging legal and public relations battle. He looked directly into the cameras, his expression resolute. Dr. Montgomery, if you're watching this, I want you to understand something clearly. This isn't just a corporate maneuver or a PR strategy. This is a father's promise to his son, a chairman's commitment to medical ethics, and a man's dedication to seeing justice done, regardless of the personal cost. The press conference concluded with the 4 of them, Richard, Lauren, Ethan, and Maria, standing together as questions flew from all directions. Richard deflected most promising, more detailed briefings in the coming days as their legal strategy unfolded. As they made their way back to the private office, Lauren pulled Richard aside. "You didn't tell me you were stepping down as CEO," she whispered urgently. "Richard, that's too much. This is my fight, not yours." "It became my fight the moment you helped Ethan," Richard replied. "And practically speaking, I can't effectively run a medical corporation while waging war against one of the most respected children's hospitals in the country. This way, Bennett Medical is insulated from the worst of the fallout." "But your career is exactly where it should be," Richard interrupted gently. "For the first time in years, I'm fighting for something that matters more than quarterly projections or stock valuations." Before Lauren could respond, Jessica approached with a tablet displaying breaking news alerts. "It's already making headlines everywhere," she reported. "Medical CEO steps down to fight for disgraced doctors' redemption." The markets are reacting. Bennett Medical stock dropped sharply, then rebounded. Investors are uncertain how to interpret the move. "And Boston Children's?" Richard asked. "No official statement yet, but sources report Dr. Montgomery has called an emergency meeting with hospital administration and legal counsel." Richard nodded, satisfied. "Good, she's on defense now. Torres, any update on the Martinez records?" Michael Torres, who had been monitoring communications from the back of the room, stepped forward. 3 independent experts have confirmed the authenticity of the original records. The timestamps and digital signatures prove the modifications were made using Montgomery's access credentials. "And the other matter we discussed?" Richard pressed. Torres nodded. "In progress. Should have confirmation by morning." Lauren looked between them, confused. "What other matter?" Richard exchanged a glance with Torres before answering. "We have reason to believe Sophia Martinez might not be the only case where Montgomery intervened with negative outcomes. Torres is examining records of other patients treated during the same period." Lauren's eyes widened with horrified understanding. You think she deliberately harmed other children to discredit competing treatment approaches? We don't know yet, Richard admitted. But if Montgomery was willing to paralyze one child to steal your research, it stands to reason she might have established a pattern. Lauren stepped away, visibly shaken by the implication. Ethan, sensing her distress, came to her side and took her hand. It's okay, Lauren, he said with a child's simple certainty. Daddy always wins his fights. He'll make the bad doctor pay for hurting those kids. Out of the mouths of babes, Richard thought, watching his son comfort the brilliant doctor who had given him hope. Ethan was right about one thing: Richard Bennett did not lose fights once he committed to them. And he had never been more committed than he was to this battle. As they prepared to leave the community center, Richard's phone rang with an unlisted number. Stepping away from the group, he answered cautiously. Bennett, you've made a serious mistake today, Mr. Bennett. Victoria Montgomery's voice was cold, controlled, but with an undercurrent of rage. You've staked your reputation on a discredited doctor and unverifiable accusations. Boston Children's Hospital will not stand for this defamation. It's only defamation if it's false, Dr. Montgomery, Richard replied evenly. And we both know the truth about Sophia Martinez. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Montgomery hissed. The Prometheus Protocol represents years of research and millions in investment. Careers and reputations beyond mine are at stake. The board of Boston Children's, the pharmaceutical partners, the research foundations, they won't allow a corporate raider and a disgraced doctor to derail this work. Interesting choice of words, Richard noted. Derail this work rather than disprove these accusations. You're not even trying to claim innocence anymore. Innocence is irrelevant, Montgomery snapped. Results are what matter in medicine. The Prometheus Protocol works perhaps not as efficiently as Reynolds' original design, but well enough. The clinical trials will prove it, and no amount of PR maneuvering or emotional appeals from you will change that. Then why are you calling Dr. Montgomery if you're so confident in your position? Why bother with threats? A pause, then Montgomery's voice dropped lower. Because I'm offering you one last chance to minimize the damage. Withdraw your accusations. Issue a statement clarifying that you misspoke under emotional duress. Return to running your company and let Reynolds fade back into obscurity. And if I refuse, then prepare yourself for scrutiny like you've never experienced. Your business practices, your personal life, your son's medical care, everything will be examined in excruciating detail. And Lauren Reynolds will never practice medicine again, not even unofficially. I'll make certain of it. Richard smiled, though Montgomery couldn't see it. Thank you for that, doctor. It's always useful to have threats recorded for later legal proceedings. He ended the call before she could respond, turning to find Lauren watching him with concern. Montgomery, she asked unnecessarily. Richard nodded, threatening the full weight of Boston Children's and their pharmaceutical partners if we don't back down. Will you? Lauren asked quietly. Back down? No one would blame you after those threats. Richard looked at his son chatting animatedly with Maria Martinez about her daughter Sophia, then back to Lauren, the woman whose brilliance and dedication had accomplished what millions of dollars in conventional treatment could not. 3 months ago, I might have, he admitted. I would have calculated the costs and benefits, determined that the fight wasn't worth the potential damage, and found a graceful way to retreat. And now, Lauren prompted, when he fell silent. Richard reached for her hand, holding it firmly in his. Now I understand what Claire always tried to tell me, that some battles are worth fighting regardless of the cost. That true healing isn't measured in stock prices or corporate expansion. His eyes found Ethan again. That a father's most important responsibility isn't providing wealth or status, but standing for what's right, especially when it's difficult. Lauren's fingers tightened around his, her emerald eyes bright with emotion. We might lose Richard. Montgomery has powerful allies, institutional backing. Maybe, Richard acknowledged. But here's what Montgomery doesn't understand about me. I didn't build Bennett Medical by avoiding fights I might lose. I built it by recognizing which battles are worth every resource I possess. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. And Lauren, I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am about this one. As they joined Ethan and Maria, preparing to face the cameras and reporters still gathered outside, Richard felt a sense of purpose and clarity that had been missing since Claire's death. Montgomery had made a critical error in her calculations. She had assumed Richard Bennett would respond as a CEO, protecting a corporation, not as a father defending his son's future, or a man standing beside a woman he was growing to care for deeply. It was a mistake she would soon regret.